On today's episode of The Strange Show, I had the pleasure of interviewing Jeremy Kwaterski at this year's Gadget Repair Expo in Miami. Jeremy founded the first cell phone repair franchise in 2004 and is widely considered the godfather of the cell phone repair industry. Jeremy sold his ownership stake in the cell phone repair franchise in 2013. Only 6 years later, the cell phone repair franchise with over 700 locations worldwide was sold to Assurant, a major player in our industry with a massive $10 billion market cap. Jeremy's passion for our industry led him to quickly get back involved, leading him to launch the Repairs First Association, which specializes in offering franchise-level support without requiring repair shop owners to be in a particular franchise network. Additionally, Jeremy helped found and build the Gadget Repair Expo, which is a leading repair-specific industry conference for repair shop owners. In our conversation, we explored the current state of the cell phone repair industry, why the big corporate franchisees are struggling, how Jeremy grew the cell phone repair franchise to over 500 locations, the coming wave of robotics repair, and so much more. This was genuinely one of my favorite conversations that I've had so far. Jeremy is an industry OG, so I hope that you enjoyed this conversation as much as I enjoyed having it. Today's sponsor is my company, XI Repair. If you need your device repaired or data recovered, check out xirepair.com. We're an official Apple and Samsung independent service provider, and we can help fix your cell phone, tablet, computer, laptop, and game console. We offer an industry-leading warranty and have successfully fixed over 40,000 devices since 2018. Now, on to my conversation with the godfather of cell phone repair. I know you refer to yourself as the godfather of repair. And well, there's a reason for that.
Yes, it came from more than myself. I didn't invent that. I didn't coin it myself, but a lot of people said, you're like the godfather of this business. You're like the godfather of this business. So I started in cell phone repair in 1997.
Wow.
And probably before most people in here are even born.
I was born in 99. So
there you go.
There you go. You have more experience than I am old.
It was a kind of a strange thing because in 95, I started recrystallizing repage, for pagers and that kind of stuff. And a lot of my customers were coming back with their phones and they're going, can you fix this? Because I fixed your pager. Why wouldn't I be able to fix that? Well, it wasn't like today's world. You don't have parts vendors from China. There's nowhere to buy parts. So we quickly realized in order to service a customer, we'd have to start stripping these parts and harvesting from brand new phones. So if you had a brand new Nokia 2160, say back in the day, in order for us to fix it, we would take apart a brand new Nokia 2160, take the LCD out of it, and replace it with yours. And now we had a main board, a charging port, antennas, batteries, back plate, front plate, keypad, everything else to sell on top of that. So we would start harvesting hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of phones a month. And we started in Orlando, in Central Florida. And we quickly became known as the guys that could fix these phones, right? So we were getting referrals from all over, and that started spreading. So it spread from Orlando to, all of Florida, and then we were the Southeast, and then pretty soon we were known. We had people shipping phones to us from all over the country.
Were you working out of your house at this point?
Oh, no, never.
This
is
never. 97,
I had a retail shop.
Okay.
I was doing activations at one point. This goes back a ways. So I do activations all the way from 92 to 97 before I started repairing phones. So if you can imagine, the AT&T was McCaw Cellular, and then Cellular One, and then AT&T. And then you're going back even, in another direction, you talk about T-Mobile used to be VoiceStream, and before that it was Aerial. And so if you're talking about, Sprint PCS used to be Primeco. So you talk about these companies that I way back I dealt with. Now they're companies that you can hear the brand, but I remember where they evolved from. So the Qualcomms of the day, we were repairing those. So we quickly learned that harvesting phones, even though it was lucrative, was difficult because, imagine if you got 300 phones, but everybody coming in wants LCDs. So now you have all these brand new phones without any LCDs. So one day AT&T came in, and we were at AT&T at that point, and they said, hey, you're one of our biggest dealers in Florida, but you're buying 500 phones, but you're only doing 250 activations out of this store. where's the rest of the phones going? And we're like, well, let me explain. Let me show you the back room. We have all these hundreds of phones just dismantled. And they're like, wait a minute. So what you're saying is you're taking out brand new parts out of a brand new phone, and you put them in a crappy, broken, used phone? Why? I said, because people want to pay for it. They want their data. They need their information out of there. And back in then, you couldn't really extract data without being able to obviously power on, see the screen, that kind of stuff.
Like contacts and photos and all the things.
People had to have it, and they had to have it now.
Yeah,
I mean, it's no different than it is today. Back then, there was really no recourse. If you broke your phone, your LCD was smashed, you're out of luck.
Yeah, no iCloud backups.
Yeah, nothing like that, right? You didn't have it. So we explained to him that our issue was parts, and Nokia was the brand. Like Apple obviously was not known. So you had Nokia, you had Qualcomm, you had some audio box phone, you had some Motorola's.
Was Motorola?
Yeah,
prominent?
Motorola. You had Ericsson, which kind of evolved, like back in the early 1998, 1999, Ericsson started evolving. So we were like, basically, we have no way to get into these parts. And so AT&T, they said, well, let's see what we can do. So maybe a few weeks later, I heard from them, and they said, how would you like to be the first Nokia authorized repair center in the United States? And I said, well, heck yeah, of course, I'm not going to deny that, So I was super excited.
And are you still in a retail location at this point?
Oh yeah, I know.
That's
I had 14 technicians servicing phones being shipped to us from all over the country, and harvesting almost all of it.
Wow.
Or repairing it. If it was water damage, that kind of stuff, we repair it without any parts. Of course, we'd love to do it. So at this point, we needed real access to real parts. So once we became a Nokia authorized repair center, we were able to draft that into, Motorola, which we were already buying pager parts from, but they weren't selling, Motorola, parts for like the StarTAC or if you even know what a StarTAC is, going way back.
Before my time.
Before the Razor.
But prominent brand.
Before the Razor. Then you had like the V60, and you had some other phones that were analog based. This is before they even became digital.
Wow.
So they, we started dealing with Motorola or Samsung, and they're saying, hey, okay, we understand Nokia's got this program. We're going to help you become one of our first as well. So once we kind of locked down the manufacturers, we had a steady access to parts, which is really nice. And that led us into going, hey, how do we grow this business, right? So we've already got 14 technicians. We're all in this 4,000 square foot building. What do we do next? Like, I had friends that were in the activation business going, can I open one of these? What are you doing here? You're making a ton of money, making way more than we are.
Could you share what revenue was back then? Do you remember any idea what you guys were doing in repairs?
50 to 60,000 a month,
in
something
repairs?
right there. Yeah, in repairs. And I didn't want to lose my AT&T revenue, which is 50,000 a month too. So I was like, I'm doing like 100,000 between activations and repairs. And I was like, how can I do this? Because one, I don't have the capacity to grow myself organically over and over again. And so a friend of mine was an attorney, and he said, why don't you just franchise? And my company was Global Cellular at the time. And he's like, it's okay, but it wasn't tell me anything about repair. Like, why don't you, talk to me and we'll put together something. So I got back to him a couple of weeks later and I said, I've got a name. And I said, CPR Cell Phone Repair. And he says, well, I don't know if we can get the CPR. I don't know if we can do that, but we could try, and he said, we'll try that. And he said, what about a logo? So I gave him a logo with a cross on it. And he's like, ooh, that's a Swiss cross. I don't think we can get that either. That's already a trademark, somewhere for CPR or first class, first aid or whatever. I said, oh man, that's a shame. So I already had this whole plan laid out. But lo and behold, about a month later, he gets back to me and said, I got both of these. I can get both of these for you. And he said, what a great name. I think you'll do well. I said, okay. So this was 2004. And in 2004, I really started and launched CPR Cell Phone Repair. By 2009, 10, we had a little over 100 locations. And from 2010 to 2015, we grew almost 500 more.
Wow.
So
were you involved with the company at that point?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. In 2013, we were bought by a company called the Davies Group, but I stayed on as the co-CEO of the company until 2015. 2015, I fully exited with just short of about 800 locations worldwide, CPR Cell Phone Repair. So that's where the Godfather thing kind of comes in.
Well, I mean, you invented the industry. It's a fair.
A lot of people point to that and say,
Yeah.
where would we be if you hadn't done what you did, right?
Absolutely.
So which is interesting. So
I also find it interesting that the first authorized dealers for the OEM was using pooled parts. You fast forward 10 years later, and if you tell Apple that in 2008, 2009, 2010, when they were first making the iPhone, they would say, you can't fix these, let alone with used parts. Even today, they scoff when you say used parts, but first authorized dealers
the first iPhone was what? 06, 2006?
2007, 2006.
Yeah,
was, I believe, the first model.
iPhone. So they said, oh, it can't be repaired. So what we did was we quickly learned you take a big screwdriver, big flathead screwdriver, like pop the top off of it, put that in the back, insert it, and pop the whole steel cover off the back. And we started repairing them.
I started with 4. We've ironically had a few iPhone, like the old models that have come in recently for data recovery and stuff. But when I started my company XI Repair, we started with the iPhone 4, so it was a little bit easier to repair than those.
The 3s are actually easier than the 4s because you can put a suction cup right on the front, pop the whole front of the face off.
That is true. That is true,
man. So and there never was there's a 3G. It was designed as an iPhone 3G, right? And so the iPhone 2 never was. It was an iPhone, then the iPhone 3. So interesting enough, a lot of people ask, what was the iPhone 2? Never was one.
Yeah.
That is the number there.
That is true. Yeah, it is funny how they've used the 3G and the 4G as kind of like, you're getting a new wireless connection. Correct. And then they've just continued the trend as iPhone 4G went to iPhone 5 and then so on and so on.
And then they realized they're not going to have 5, 6G, 7G, right? So what are we going to do now? So now they just kept a series of numbers going.
Yeah.
Kind of like the Gadget Repair Expo, right? We're in 5.0 right now. That's kind of why we did that. So we want you to know that how long is the Gadget Repair Expo run on? Well, this is 5.0 right here. So this is our 5th show, which is really cool.
That's smart marketing. When you went from one store, so you franchised, you trademarked the logo, you came up with all the content and created CPR as a brand. What did it take? And kind of walk me through a little bit about how you went from one store in Tampa to 500
we were
locations.
In Orlando.
Sorry, Orlando.
Sorry,
my apologies. My apologies.
We did have a location in Tampa, though. That's so what happens is we had such an interest in what we were doing that organically we grew just by friends and people that I knew in the business that were in the wireless side. They were just selling AT&T or T-Mobile or something like that. And they said, how do we get involved in doing what you're doing, right? How do we become a CPR? Well, just come in, pay me a franchise fee, right? And we'll get you set up. So organically was our growth for probably the first 5 or 6 years. And then we really turned on the fire by, utilizing what they call franchise broker associations and things like that to help us kind of grow. We didn't have enough manpower to take in, the thousands of phone calls and emails that we were getting a month. So once we could kind of focus on that sales process is when we were able to kind of lock it down and get people tied in versus, I remember at one point I was getting, 50 emails a day. Like, I want to become a franchise. How do I do it? I didn't have enough time to respond to everybody, all the phone calls we were getting. But it's a brand new industry. They see you making money. They want to be part of that, right? And our franchise fee was really low then too. So it was only like $9,500. And now I think at least when I exited, it was $35,000 for a franchise fee. And we had to do that because the growth was just so fast that in order to slow it down a little bit, we just started raising the price and making the barrier to entry a little bit more difficult. And then, of course, we had to introduce train because we can't train everybody for 30 days. So we used to go out, send somebody there and train you at your store for a month, right? We run your business, help you train your technicians, all that. But when you put on 100 stores in 1 year, there's no way to do that.
Yeah, you don't have enough
So
manpower.
we had to go back to our, start creating training and content and all these things around that so we can not only train you, but also support you. And so that growth wasn't just by numbers alone. It was also by, internally, like, how do we grow to support? So it is an extremely complicated process to grow to, 500 plus stores. And any franchise company will tell you that.
Oh, yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, it's
and
super
so,
motivating to,
and
like
when I got an offer in 2013 um, to stay on but sell, I was like, well, these guys have 7 or 8 franchise brands already. So my hope was that they would take them to the next level. And unfortunately, they didn't really do that. They were more interested in selling it again to Assurant, and that's what happened. And so now I would say I could step back in and run CPR today, way better than it's being run. So if anybody's listening to this that runs CPR, from Assurant, maybe you need to give me a call because from what I'm seeing, we've got a lot of younger competitors out there, you know,
ding, ding, ding,
beating
ding.
their butts. And that's only because as you get big and you're bought by these conglomerates who no longer have any vision, you're being taken by the guys that are younger, gals that are younger, that have vision, that have exciting ideas, and you're just no longer able to capture that quickly enough.
And it's
And
hard to
that's why
execute
I
at
did so
scale.
well because what
Yeah.
I was young, right? But I was also had the capability of making decisions on the fly based on the way I thought the business was going.
Mm.
Are we doing computers? Are we doing iPads? Are we doing whatever the latest innovation is? How do we capture that? And part of my, speech yesterday, I call it a keynote, but my keynote yesterday was about robotics. And I really believe the future of this business before we know it will be robotics in one way or the other. You cannot escape it. And so if we start looking at what's our next step, not only handheld devices, of course, but if you've got a robot that's functioning in somebody's house, like the Optimus or the NVIDIA, imagine, the wife, the housewife, they can no longer do chores. What's going to happen? What are they going to do? They're going to box it up in a crate and ship it back to Tesla or NVIDIA? I don't think so. They're going to bring it to a local shop. And who's that? Nobody but us. We are the ones. We're the only ones that really understand it. Now, what will we have to get into like servo motors and things like that? Sure, why not? But at the end of the day, it's all about the circuit boards, right?
Sure.
It's no different than a
Batteries.
laptop, but it's introducing some small mechanical things. But there is nobody poised to capture that business today, more poised than us. There's a cell phone repair industry.
I think it's interesting that you point out, like, and I'm super happy that you're able to reflect on CPR and see how it's changed over the years. Because as an independent repair shop myself, when CPR got bought out by Assurant, a lot of us felt like that was the end of the industry because, man, they're gonna roll everything up and they're gonna have the insurance partnerships and the customers are gonna be sent there directly funneled from the carrier stores. And even with all of that, I would argue that today the independents are thriving. Um, I think it's mainly a quality thing. A lot of the franchises just don't care like an independent does, and the quality of work is reflected, and the customer gets a device that's broken for when all it needed was a screen, and then they take it to an independent and never go back to that franchise store. What's your read on that? Do you think it's because of
No,
quality?
you're
Do you think it's
absolutely
because
right.
of leadership?
You're absolutely right. So what happens when you buy a franchise? Most of our franchise originally came out of the Fortune 5 companies, right? So they're cashing their 401ks. They're coming in and like, hey, I manage and run groups of hundreds of people. I can easily run 10 stores, right? Well, the issue is it's not really an absentee owner situation here, right? So when you have 10 stores operating without an owner, without a real manager, nobody's really overseeing your quality control, or even the quality of the employees and your interface, your front end interface to customers, you're going to lose. And that's why independents that operate 1, 2 stores can be so powerful.
Mm.
And if I'm competing against you, and I'm a CPR or you break or whatever. Uh, if I don't have an in-store owner, I don't really have the capability of making decisions. One on, the guy comes in, he's got a fleet of plumbing trucks and wants a discount for all of his iPads or whatever, point of sale, whatever he's got. He wants to have a B2B account. Well, guess what? They can't make that decision. They're
Sure.
just the guy running in front, but you can,
Yeah.
right? And so you now took that business from them because you had a capability of making decisions on the fly.
Yeah.
And as you become bigger and heavier, you become like the Titanic. CPR can't make decisions in this industry quick enough to pivot. And that can be said for any large company, right? Once they get too big, they get too big to be, um, too big to be reactive to industry trends faster than your independent guy.
Yeah.
And so there's your power right there.
Another aspect of that is, as interesting enough, in 2018 in Montgomery, Alabama, where my store's at, we had the Asurion contract to do mobile repair. Um, and obviously they got bought out by Asurion, so that kind of got swooped away from us. And one of the things we were worried about was, well, man, Assurion's going with Ubrake. They're going to have the Samsung partnership. They're going to be partnering with Apple. They're getting the Google one. It's over. And it was interesting because what actually happened was the authorized side of things, like take Assurion, for example, with Samsung. They're not allowed to touch the liquid damage devices. They have all these restrictions where they can't use aftermarket parts. So Samsung's out of stock of the genuine, and they're having to tell customers, you got to go down the street to XI Repair because they're the
Right.
ones that have it in stock. And you fast forward a year or two later, now we're an ISP, independent Samsung service provider. We have access to the same exact parts at the same exact cost without a royalty on top of it. And the same thing with Apple, but we can offer aftermarket parts too. You can't compete against us now. We have the same logos on our website that the franchises do, with the same authorizations, with the exception of not being able to do free in warranty repairs, which we don't want anyways because there's not a lot of money in it.
Never been a lot of money.
Right, and now it's like I think the independents kind of have the upper hand, and you would never have thought that would have been the
Well,
case.
their strengths, what their perceived strengths that you thought they had, are now their weaknesses, right? So they
Sure.
operate within a framework of corporate relationship where they
Yeah.
tie these agreements up, and they said, you can only do this or you can only do
Yeah.
that. And they said, okay, fine, we'll do it. But they didn't realize they'd no longer be reactive to the same thing that you can be reactive to.
Sure.
Is, okay, we can put an OEM part in here, or we can do an aftermarket part. Which one do you want to pay for? Right.
Yeah.
So, like, if you're doing an Asurion job now for you break out fix, they can only use that Samsung OEM part.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. So now they're going, oh no, we don't have that one in stock, like you said.
Yeah.
So now they're going down the street and they're going, these guys are so much nicer anyway. I'm going to continue to do
And they
business
got it
with
in
them.
stock. Yeah.
Right. So I think we see that not only in this industry, but we see it in any industry really. And that's kind of what happens when you become a big franchise model that's not led, I would say, by somebody like myself, who is a visionary
Yeah.
and understands that we have problems in all our stores. These are our problems. How do we fix them? Right.
Sure.
Now they're owned by corporate guys, like billion-dollar corporate
Yeah.
guys, right? Who don't care.
Yeah.
They don't care. And one of the things I see franchisees, I've seen them here in the show. They come up to me and they go, Jeremy, I wish you were back at the helm. Why since you left, nobody cares about us. If I have a problem, I can't call somebody,
Yeah.
right? I ask a question, nobody answers me,
Yeah.
And so they're stuck here paying royalties, as you said, but at the same token, they're getting they're getting no training, no support. Like they come out with these new programs, they're like, this is going to be the biggest thing. Well, guess what? The franchisees have no idea how to do it. They have no idea how to implement it. So sorry. I feel so bad for them, but they renewed their contracts. They continue to stay in that business, and at some point, I know they're not going to anymore.
Are you
And-
familiar with the techie guys like
Yeah,
Tim and
I am.
Tech?
I am.
I admire Techie, even though I'm not a franchise myself, because it feels like Techie is a franchise that's repair centric.
Mhm.
And it feels like that's counter to the Asurion and CPR that feel like they've become insurance centric, right? We have 2 employees that we've recently hired that quit from our local Ubrake store, and they tell us all the time, I just wanted to be a technician. And they told me that I either had to sell and cram down this Asurion Plus down the throat of my customer who has a 10-year-old phone and just wants a battery in it. And I couldn't do it. I didn't meet the quotas because I'm just a technician. I don't even want to talk to customers. I just want to fix things.
Right.
And
Right.
it feels like the CPRs and the Assurions of the world try to become almost like a Geico center, right? Of like, you come in and we sell you insurance, and that was the value that the corporations saw in it, not an actual service model. Do you agree with that? Do you
Absolutely.
see that?
So one of the things we always just talk about are hybrids. So a hybrid is, in our mind, is somebody that can not only sell but also repair. The problem with that is it's great. You have 2 hybrids in your store, right? But if somebody's trying to solder and now they're trying to pick up a phone call,
Sure,
it-
exactly.
You can't
Doesn't
be
work.
interrupted by a repair
Yeah.
job, and nowadays even more so. Like, you're down in micro soldering, you're getting phone calls. What do you want me to do here? You know what I mean? I'm supposed to have a customer in the front interrupt what I'm doing. I set down my phone and I'm in the process of repairing. Now I got to run up front and try to sell somebody some insurance. The problem being here is hybrids can be all right, but you really have to have a separation of back of house and front of the house. Your techs should be techs. Your salespeople should be salespeople.
Mm,
And if you're trying to lean on both for one person, you're going to fail.
absolutely.
You're going to fail.
Yeah.
Dedicate a salesperson to sales.
Yeah, absolutely.
Dedicate a tech to do good tech. And so that's why our stores were so successful, because we knew and recognized that. Personally, I came from the sales world first, but I love tech. I was always, tearing things apart. But what I knew is I can't wear all these hats. I can't run back and forth. I can't ring up every customer and fix every phone. And so I see this, and even as independents, obviously you see this, is that one of the things I see them struggle with is they're like, "Oh, I can't afford to hire somebody." You can't afford not to hire somebody. You have
Yeah.
no idea what you're losing in front of your store by yelling from the back, "I'll be right with you," and a person standing up there fidgeting like, "Where's everybody at? There's nobody here," right? And they don't realize you cannot operate a store as the guy that runs the tech, that answers the phones, that helps the customers. That you can't do all that.
Yeah, you're
And
limiting yourself
and
big time.
and Asurion, or the CPR, or the break I fix, that's what they try to do, is
Yeah.
make everyone a hybrid. That's not possible.
Yep. Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. Did it shock you to see the OEMs like Apple and Samsung? I mean, you've been in this forever. Did it shock you to see them finally come around and, how they talk about us, right? I laugh when I first had a conversations with people at Apple, I was third party. Now I'm an independent repair provider partner. Does that shock you? Or did you maybe anticipate that would eventually happen one day?
I always knew it would happen,
Yeah.
simply because they can't open enough Apple stores. They
Yeah.
can't. It's not their model. Their model is not to be a repair center,
Yeah.
right? But yet they want to sell hundreds of millions of phones. Somebody has to service them. You're not going to talk every customer into buying a brand new phone, especially when they just bought it 2 months ago.
Mm.
They break it. Now what? I mean, in I think when I first tried to get authorized with Samsung, I remember this conversation back in the late '90s, and I said, I was at the CES show, and I sat down with one of the guys, the VPs there, and he's like, "I don't need people fixing the phones. I'll just sell them another one." I said, "You don't even know what you're talking about." You know what I mean? Him and I got in a tiff a little bit because I told him, "You are absolutely out of your mind if you think people are not going to want to fix a device they just paid $1,000 for." He's like, "Well, they'll just buy another one." No, they won't. They'll go to your competitor. They'll pick up a Sanyo, or they'll pick up a Motorola. Right? We didn't have iPhone then, but they'll pick up a different manufacturer model that's willing, especially Motorola, that's willing to work with people like myself as an authorized repair center. Why would Samsung not want to do that? And he was like, "We just sell another device." No, 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 no. That's not going to work.
Yeah.
There's a zero end game to that.
Yeah.
And so I knew that eventually Apple would have to. They had to. They had no choice.
Yeah. It's interesting that relationship. You mentioned earlier, I never thought about how the older devices had your data on it and there was no cloud backup, right? I grew up with devices, their iCloud was on the earlier models. There was some form of cloud backup. Granted, a lot of customers don't use it or don't have everything backed up, but for the ones that are reasonable and smart, there's typically a backup option. So if they break it and they choose to fix it, it's not simply for data recovery. What do you think about how our relationship with these devices, even though there are these other options for a backup, how do you think about how, for example, Apple Pay? A lot of customers are starting to use that as their primary source of payment, right? They walk out of their house without even a wallet, and even though Apple might say, well, they can just buy another one and sign into their device. To your point, now these phones are becoming our physical wallet. These phones are becoming how I track my blood pressure and my sugar levels. And if that dies, I could die or I could not be able to buy lunch today. How do you see that impacting our industry and how it's evolved?
Well, at one point, these phones were more of a status symbol, right? So I remember way back in the early days, they said, "Oh, you know what? We're going to make phones." I remember go to CES, and they said, "We're designing phones that can be just thrown away. You use the airtime, you just toss them away." I was like, "Who's going to want some piece of garbage you can throw away?" Right? So Americans don't even, it doesn't even operate like that. Everything's a status. from your shoes to the clothes you wear to the phone you're going to be holding in your hand. They want the latest and the greatest and the coolest, right? That whole philosophy doesn't work for me. And so what over time it became more obviously than just the status. It became what they can do as a smartphone, the options, the apps. Even we both know this. Most people have this capability of backing everything up to the cloud. They don't.
Yeah, they don't. They don't
They
use
don't.
it. They don't even know how to get
Everything
it.
they have is still in that phone. They didn't even
Jeremy, they don't
realize.
remember their password. You and me both know that.
So, I mean, great for the ones that do, but even the ones that do, when you realize that you got to replace your device, it's not as easy as that. Trying to, you go into your local Verizon store and they tell you, oh, go see XI Repair because they can really help you move that data over. They'd rather send it to you because they don't have time for that. They're in a sales mode right now. They're not in data extraction mode, right?
Sure.
So yeah, they sell them another phone, but now you get their business again. And now they're going, wait a minute, I could have fixed this phone. I didn't even know it. Verizon didn't tell me it could be fixed until they sent me to you to get extract the data. And so the whole transfer data thing is still a huge encumbrance on anybody. I mean, even me, I had to swap my phone out, like a year ago when I went to my 16. And I said, what am I going to do? I mean, my 15 Pro. I haven't got to 16 yet. So what am I going to do? Because all my apps now need to be signed in. Like, what are my passwords? I don't remember. Like the stuff you all put all that data in there. Yeah, you can transfer your contacts and hopefully most of your pictures will be there. But a lot of times it's not. And they come back to you and you do a data transfer. They come back and go, where's all my information at? It's just not all here. But I have no way of knowing, the job that you came into me and I transfer your data. I have no idea what data you have or what you don't. I'm just transferring it. Right. Well, I used to have a bunch of pictures of this, my cat or whatever. Well, guess what? I don't have any idea what happened to that data. So did you save it? Did you back it up in the cloud? Well, I don't know. I thought I did. So that becomes, and again, to your point, it's become like a medical device. They're connected to everything. If I get somebody opens my front door, now I get an app alert that somebody is, I got a camera, I'm then watching it. All this stuff is connected on my phone. I can't stand to lose it. I can't.
Yeah.
I don't even want to transfer my data. If I could fix it and you can save it, I'm going to have you do it.
Absolutely.
And so I think, to your question, it makes it even more important to have this industry. This industry is so vital, so vital. And when I hear people say, oh, the industry is dying, no, it's not. No, it's not. You're just not evolving.
Yeah.
That is the issue. You're stuck in your same ways that you did business 10 years ago, and you haven't evolved to today. And if you don't evolve, you're dead. Yes, I agree. You're dying, not the industry.
Absolutely agree. If you were talking to the franchises or independents at a whole, what are two or three things that you think need to change in the average repair shop to adapt to maybe the serialization that we've seen on parts, or maybe just the decline in screen replacement specifically, just because maybe the devices don't crack as easily? Like, what are some of the things that you see that need to change per se for the average repair shop to adapt, in your opinion?
I mean, I think not necessarily is every shop the same, right? And what
Yeah,
needs to
of
be
course, it's a
changed.
broad
So I
question.
think that adapting is really down to what's your core? What are you doing? And what I see is, I only fix iPhones. Remember those days?
Yeah.
Everybody came up with some kind of I name, and then they only did iPhones. Well, obviously they quickly realized that that's not going to make you much money, right? Even though it's probably 80% of our business, there's what about the other 20, right? And so I think that, you have to be able to adapt by, keeping your mind open that you can repair anything if you really want to. That's one part of it, the technical side. And I think when you're talking about serialization, that kind of thing, what I find is probably half of the stores don't even keep inventory, right? So, and you're complaining that you're losing money, but yet you don't have no idea how much money you're losing by not tracking your own inventory. How do you know that new technician you just hired isn't taking parts from your bin and fixing their friends' phones on the side? That's something I ran into many times over the last 35 years. Everybody thinks that they can do something. If you're not tracking your inventory and you're not tracking your sales, yeah, what is your data? What are your key performance indicators? And when I say that, what does that mean? What that means is what are your top selling products? How are you extracting the data from your point of sale? Other than just keeping inventory, are you serializing? Are you right along with that? Because as that stuff starts coming out, especially with Apple, and you're putting that product in, and it's got to match, and you got to know what you're doing. All that stuff should be part of your plan. What is your plan of action? And if you don't have a plan of action, you just reaction. You're not being innovative, and you're not looking to the future. If you got to have a 5-year plan, and heck, have a 1-year plan, have some sort of plan. That way you're not reacting. And when you're reacting to everything, you're already behind. Got to be proactive. And so what I see is that if you're proactive, you're also looking out there going, like you're coming to the Gadget Repair Expo and going, how do I fix this? How do I get into micro soldering? Anybody that doesn't have a micro soldering technician, why not make it yourself at least, right? I mean, if you're going to invest that kind of time and effort as an owner, make sure you can do it. That way you can replicate it. And if your technician leaves, you're not stuck holding a bag of nothing.
Yeah.
So at least make sure that you're leading the training. You don't have to operate in your store every day. You can sit back and manage the process, but you should be part of the innovation. What am I doing? How do I making sure I'm not saying no to customers? And I see that all the time. Like, oh, I don't fix that. Why not? I seen in my daughter's store the other day. They got a jukebox. This thing's from 1970s, right? The guy brought it in because we fix everything for him. He said, "Can you fix this jukebox?" And why not? Let's take a look at it, right?
Yep.
All it needed was a rubber band on a terminal. I mean, on the rotating table. That's all it needed. Now, was that high tech? No, that was low tech. But they trusted us to open it up because we never say no. I'd never said no in any of my stores ever that I can't fix that. I will give it my best try.
Sure.
But if you say no, they're going to go to somebody and go, hey, I went down there, but they told me they couldn't fix it, so they probably can't fix that. Never put yourself in that space because your job is to fix it. And if you can't fix it, that's gonna replicate to your audience. Like they're gonna now say, well, they don't fix those things, or they can't fix this. Or I went in there and they told me they don't fix water damage. Why not? Why not give it your best shot? Right? Maybe your success ratio is only 20% on water damage. You're not going to tell the customer that. You're going to say, I'm going to give it my best shot. And so what I see is that a lot of these owners are not trying to be innovative. They're not trying to plan ahead, and they're not doing enough to try to satisfy the customer's needs. And you should be tracking that. Like if somebody says, do you have this? And you say no, we used to make a list. How many no's we got on that particular question, right? Did we carry this case? Well, we said no 5 times this week. Why don't we have it in stock, right? So anytime we would say a no, we called a bounce. Why did the customer bounce? Why didn't we have that? Right? Well, you didn't have any Android phones this week. Why not?
You're right.
Right? We have 5 people coming in asking for Android phones. We don't have any. Why not? Right? I'm just making that as a global example.
Sure.
But we want to make sure that we identify and meet any needs that might be needed. So when you say no to something, that's bad. So I always try to say yes, even if you're not sure. Give it your best shot because nobody else is saying yes.
Absolutely. Those are great pieces of advice. I would assume your exit was probably 7 figures. What do you say to
It was 100 figures.
It was really 100 figures? That's crazy.
No,
That's
no,
crazy,
no.
man. You must have a house
you
over
always
by
hear
Jeff
from
Bezos.
anybody that ever sold a company is,
Yeah.
I probably didn't get as much as I should have. Right?
That's what they all
So
say.
one thing we always got to say is, like, I did it for 2 different reasons. Not just to sell for money, but I did it because I wanted to benefit the franchisees as a whole. Because you got to remember, these guys came to me cashing out 401ks or the life savings, and I was helping them build a business. They invested in me. They trusted in me. And so I wanted to hand off the company to somebody I thought could take it to the next level. And, 15 years ago, I was a different person, right? I was young. I didn't really think I was experienced. I didn't have any gray hair. And I was like, maybe this guy knows better, right? So I think that it wasn't just about money. It was about what can be done to help the company move forward.
Sure, yeah, and
Yeah.
I wasn't trying to insinuate that it
Oh,
was
no,
about
no, no.
money.
I understand it.
I
Yeah.
was more so just gonna make the point that I think a lot of repair shops, that is the dream. Like,
Right.
some people are here just to make money and have a family or whatever, but a lot of the creative entrepreneurs like myself, like obviously one day I want to have some form of successful exit. And not a lot of people in this industry have a successful exit. You see a
Maybe
lot of
even have an
people,
exit plan for
right?
that
They don't
matter.
have an exit plan, let alone an exit strategy or be able to exit. But you'll see them maybe come up and they survive, they make some cash, that's positive cash flow, and then it just dies and disappears.
Yeah.
You had a successful exit, and I just want to, like, what did that feel like? Like, regardless of, I know you did it because it was in the best interest of the company, but at some point it had to have felt great.
Oh, it was
Like when you first signed
exhilarating.
a deal, it must
Exhilarating.
have been
Yeah.
great.
It was nice to be part of that process for 2 years after the fact too. So not only did I sell, but I also transitioned, right? So I made sure the new owners really understood the
Like a
company,
consulting
how to run it.
capacity.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. As a co-CEO, that was my role, is to make sure that that transfer went pretty seamlessly.
Yeah.
The franchisee were on up in arms going, oh my gosh, this is crazy. These people have no idea what they're doing, which they didn't. When they bought the company, they had no idea what they were doing. So I think that, everybody wants an exit ramp, but they don't necessarily know how to get there. And I do a lot of consulting for not only franchising in this business, in this space. There's some around here that you'll see that I've actually talked to from time to time in the past and done some consulting with, that are growing. They're starting to grow 100, 200 locations. Some of them I still consult with today. So even if you've got 5 locations or you want to go to 10, you want to be a regional player. You want to be, hey, I want to be based in, where are you based out?
Alabama.
Alabama.
Alabama,
So I
Central
want to
Alabama.
be based in the South primarily, but I really think that XI Repair should be able to do, 50 locations. Right? That's my plan. How do I get there? And obviously, I'm not going to open 50 on my own. You can start small. I mean, the footprint of a franchise does never have to be in the 500, 800,000 range. It can be the most franchises in this country operate between 50 and 100 locations.
That's interesting.
So if you want to think exit ramp, you could do that easily. Talk to me, call me, contact me. I'm a very open person. I'm willing to talk to anybody. If I can help you with a phone call and not even charge you, I will. There's no point in me going, hey, by the way, why don't you sign a consulting agreement? I don't, most of my calls are, how would I do this? Well, here's how you do this. Okay, thanks. I'll call you if I need you again. Sure. So I'm not out there trying to make money off a little guy trying to grow and have an exit strategy.
You're
But
married, right?
yes, I am.
How long have you and your wife been together?
28 years.
Okay, so she was there when the exit happened. What was the first thing you guys did when you realized the stress of, you were co-CEO and that's stressful, but like, we both understand when you're the top of the chain, there's a level of stress that even when you go to sleep at night, that doesn't go away. Describe what that was like the next day, and what was the first thing you guys did to just, I'm
Uh,
free, I'm
yeah, we
free.
we vacationed a little bit. We
Yeah.
travel around the country. I mean, around the world a little bit. But at the end of the day, I looked at like what else can I get involved in, right? So I wasn't done by any stretch.
Sure,
Any
sure. You get
stretch.
bored quick if
I'm
you're an
like, what's the
entrepreneur.
next thing, right? As a matter of fact, at that time, vape businesses were becoming very popular. So I actually went in and helped a friend of mine open one. I said, it's a good little business here, I mean. So we opened 6 of those quickly. In about 3 months, we had 6 stores open. We're doing
What
really
state?
well.
Is this in Georgia?
This is in Georgia, yeah,
Nice.
yeah. And then ended up selling all 6 of them. They were gone, and I'm like, yeah, not really the business I want to be in long term, but it was a nice little business. Now we can see, obviously, it didn't have the future, and I kind of saw that it was going to have a lot of things going on, and still hadn't done through FCC approval and
A lot of
FCC or FDA approval.
lot of
Excuse me.
legislation right now to
Yeah, a
get rid
lot of
of THCA
legislation,
and
all
all
that
that.
garbage. I was like,
Yeah.
this is not the business I want to be in. So we sold that, and then since 2008 till now, about 16 years or so, I've been in hot air balloons, and so after spending several years just bored out of my mind, and we were doing 2008 to 2015, we were doing just for charity. We were just putting together big balloon festivals for charity. I got with my partner Brad Broom, and I said, let's do these for fun and money. Let's make some profits while we're at it. So now we do about 25 shows a year. We do hot air balloon festivals all the way up and down the East Coast. And my wife, she kids, she's always like, what's the next thing, right? And so like the Gadget Repair Expo, we're like, well, we got to do this. Well, first we started the RFA, the repairs first. Because what really, I mean, I go back to that a little bit. I want to do the repairs first because I wanted to help out a lot of these independent shops who are just out there going, I mean, I don't have any scale. I can't buy discount parts with one store. How do I get that franchise level kind of a support and scale?
Mm.
And so we put together repairs first to be able to gather all those numbers together
We've been a
and
member
give
since
people.
you guys
Thank you very
created
much. I
it, so
appreciate
I
it.
push a
And
lot of people towards
not only
that.
bring in discounts, right?
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
training, support, all the back end that we try to provide. And it's way better. A lot of people tell us, and we have CPRs, we have U-break fixes on an RFA, and they tell
And
us it's
independence.
way better than what they're getting
Sure.
from those guys, right? And then they're like, we pay royalties, we don't even get this stuff.
Yeah.
So that was I did that because one, I was bored and I didn't have anything in between the sale in 2019 when we started the RFA. And two, because I saw a lot of these independents just struggling, going, how do I get to that next level? How do I ever even get to an exit ramp, as you said? So now I run the RFA, the Gadget Repair Expo. I have a business of consulting with franchises and large retail corporations. I've got several franchise companies I consult with. They're not even in this space whatsoever. I've got one that does nothing but dog grooming. She's got about 45 locations. So you can just imagine that, take my knowledge of franchising over the years and kind of replicate that to some consulting. But in addition, I have a love for this industry. I'm not going to get away from it. And that's why we did the Gadget Repair Expo, because we wanted people to have some central hub, just like any other convention or expo for whether it's a dental industry or Plastic Surgeons of America. We wanted because there have been the Consumer Electronics Show, the CES. We've been to CTIA. I've been to all those shows, AWP. Um, they're not
It's not
supporting this
centric to this
industry,
industry,
right?
yeah, for
They
sure.
kind of add us as an afterthought a little bit,
Yeah,
but they never supported this industry. And I said, we need that. We
definitely.
really need that. And that's 5.0,
I
and
think you guys have
which
done a
I
good
do
job. I
very
was
well.
at the first Gadget Repair Expo in Atlanta, at the NFL museum
Oh,
downtown.
awesome location, right?
That was a great location for the first one. Yeah, I mean, and since then I've told Nicole and pretty much anyone I spoke to in our industry, there's really not an expo that's specific for repair.
Right.
And repair is just different. Like, it's not prepaid. It's not just retail. It's its own monster. And there's a lot of vendors and supply chains and just knowledge that you're going to get at Gadget Repair Expo that you're not going to get at any of those. So you guys have done a good job for sure.
Well, thank you very much.
Repairs First Association is an amazing association. And if I were to tell whoever's in charge of running it what I think as an independent repair shop that we need as an industry, I always go back to two things. One is labor and part standards. If you look at the auto repair industry, I have a book at home that I've read front and back. It's the motor times schedule from like the early 80s. You flip it open, you go to Ford, you find your model, and you'll see oil change, and it'll tell you the time that it takes on average to do that. And then there's a recommended
Chilton's of manual, right?
Yeah, exactly. This one was a motor manual specifically, but Motor went on to found Mitchell One, which is the software, kind of like a repair desk for auto industry that the majority of mechanics and body shops across the country use. And the main function of it at first was just time and labor charges and part markups. That was it. Now it's morphed into repair guides for their technicians and tracking for inventory. And if you're a small shop, you order your oil and your tires and all that through Mitchell One. It's shipped directly from the supplier. You're not going to their website or anything. I say all that to say, to me, I think that's the one thing we're missing as an industry.
Yes.
Is a standardization
So I was smiling a little bit because we've been working on that framework for a little while, and I think you're absolutely right. It's vital. Nothing will set this industry into a standardization better than that, right?
Yeah.
So we need kind of what's your bench labor time to replace an iPhone 12 LCD, right? What is that? And when you talk about mechanic shops, they know. They flip open the book
Yeah,
and they say it's
100%.
going to be 4 hours.
Yeah.
They got to quote a customer something, right?
Yeah.
So if it takes them 5, well, that's on them.
Yeah.
That's above the industry standard.
Yeah.
And so I think that you're absolutely correct. And what that leads to is more OEM downstream,
And insurance.
right?
And
Insurance,
yeah.
like we can barely get any insurance companies to trust us because
Yep.
giving ACO, for example, we work very closely with ACO.
I had Jared on yesterday, and we had this
Yeah,
exact discussion.
Jared is great.
Yep.
And the problem is you got a guy in California charging $180 because that's the market price
Yeah.
to replace an LCD on an iPhone 14. But you got a guy in Miami who's got a lot more competition. He's only charging 80.
Yep.
Well, the point is that can't be done that way. It's got to
Agreed.
be based on how long it takes you to repair, what's your bench time, and how do you create an industry standard around that? Not only that, we all familiar with WISE. I'm not going to beat up anybody here, but unfortunately, it didn't pan out the way I thought it was going to pan out. I thought it was going to pan out the way that you're thinking. There was a framework for some certification and some benchmarking times that we could go by, right? Well, it ended up being more of an OEM partnership, and they didn't really care about the independents more than just sign them on a dotted line. And their testing is so small. Like I can answer five, common sense, five common sense questions, and all of a sudden I'm certified by WISE. What? How does that? It doesn't even make sense, right? So what we're creating is let's have a real ASE style certification, where a real certification that we really have to test. I mean, I don't know if you looked into ASE.
Yeah, no, they're a great model.
Right.
100%.
They're a great model. They're
Auto Care
fantastic.
Association is
You
massive
don't
in doing.
go in there and watch and answer 5 multiple choice questions, and all of a sudden you got a certification. Sorry, it doesn't work that way. ASC is a lot more difficult to get. And so if we're going to start getting into things like relationships with Tesla or NVIDIA, and we'd start downstreaming work or repair or certifications from manufacturers like that, they're already asking us, because I've already started these conversations. I'll tell you, I'll give you the first insight. But I've already started these conversations going, RFA is the one that can distribute this information and certification. Why can't we? Because we have already 1,200 members now. Why? They're like, well, why don't you have 10,000? I don't know that answer. I wish we did, right? But once we have the ability to certify and support that framework, which I know we do, then we'll start getting some manufacturers like, Tesla or NVIDIA, and they start going, what are we going to do with these robots when we put them on there? Who's supporting them? Who's repairing them? How are we going to come up with some sort of certification around that? And I don't want it to just be about robots either. I want it to be an industry certification that you can hang proudly on your door, and people would go, hey, these guys are legit.
Yeah.
And that's important. That's any of us that go and get our car fixed, we're looking for that.
Absolutely.
Where's your ASE certification?
Yeah.
Right? Oh, I don't have one. I work, I work on a site. Yeah, that's not gonna work for me.
Yeah, and even with like their partnerships with trade schools, they've really built a reputation for that certification.
Yeah, exactly.
I bring up times and labor. You look at that issue from a authentication perspective from a customer, or maybe a reputation perspective, like, hey, if you have repairs first certification or whatever you guys are building, that's reputation. I also bring it up in agreement with you, but also about labor, because one of the issues we have is attracting and keeping good labor as an industry. And if you look at us and in the auto mechanics, we're very similar. But how are auto mechanics paid? That times table is a representation, an actual reflection of their compensation as a technician.
Definitely.
So what you're able to do is you're able to bring guys off the street, train them, give them a certification. Maybe they went to trade school for it, but they're not going to be as efficient as that mechanic that's been there 20 years and knocking out oil changes and tires super fast. And what that allows them to do is, because that 1 hour of labor he gets, whether it takes 30 minutes or 2 hours, an inexperienced technician will essentially make a little bit less money, but at the end of the day, he's going to thrive as a mechanic, as he is incentivized to actually make and be more efficient with these repairs. The guy that's been there 20 years knocking them out might have an effective hourly rate of $30, $40, $50. And I think as an electronics repair industry, we really need that, and it goes back to those timetables. So I'm super happy to hear that you guys are working on that.
Yeah, and so that might be some of the challenges, obviously, that we're going to look at, is how do we, standardize some of that without actually knowing any information, right? So, like, how do we go to, some of the conversations we're having in, like, with Repair Queue or Repair Desk is, how can we assemble some of this information from you without crossing any boundaries of, confidentiality? Yep. So what we need is we need the high level info. If you could provide that with us, how do we gather that and create some standardization around
Absolutely.
some of that data. So
Some
we're having
blind
that conversation. But if you have input, I'd love it.
blind
Let's
data
talk more.
collection from all vendors and all software companies would be
Yes.
huge.
Yes.
Um,
I
man,
certainly love to pay any technician by the job, by the hour into that job or the minutes, right? Heck, we've seen some stuff here like swapping an HDMI port in 5 minutes, or no, was it 5 minutes?
it's probably
54
5 minutes.
seconds.
Yeah. That's a quick
I know,
$130.
right. You pay that guy by an hour. He only took him 54 seconds to swap
Yeah.
that HDMI port on that PS5, right? So what's next? He already
Yeah.
got an hour's worth of labor. Now, as an owner, you say, "Oh no, I'm not going to do that." I mean, but the point is that what you're missing as an owner is he can do that much more work for you. You're
Yeah.
getting the other part of that hour, right? It's not like that hours just goes directly.
Oh, and
Yeah, that labor rate doesn't go directly to the
Yeah.
technician. He's getting paid for that hour's worth of
Mhm.
labor, even only took him 54 seconds. That's the key. If you got productivity like that, back to you, John. Now you're doing 300 hours of labor in a week, and you're really only open, 60 or 80 hours, right? So how does that how do you manage that?
and the incentive aligns when you do that, because a mechanic at a shop, a lot of shops here will say, my guys will try to do it on their own, and I always tell them, well, then you're not paying them enough and you're not bringing enough work into the shop. Because if you have the proper incentives, that mechanic doesn't want to deal with customers at his house. He's only doing that because he can't make his bills paid. If he gets a percentage of some capacity, he will be incentive to bring customers into the shop, do a good job, and do it efficiently. That's why auto shops have been
Imagine
so
a conversation.
successful.
You guy go to hire a guy, right? This technician that says, "Listen, I'll tell you what. I'm going to give you 300 hours a week and pay." What are you talking about? Well, if you can manage this kind of time frame, you could make 300 hours of labor hours, because you're doing it in 45 hours instead of 300. Wait a minute. Well, he's saying that I could make, is it
Yeah.
$10 an hour, $12 an hour times 300? Oh yeah, absolutely. It's a matter of output, right? What are you doing for me and how fast can you do it? And that's how these mechanics work. Exactly how you said.
Man, it's been an honor to sit down with you.
Yeah, me
I've
too.
been looking forward to this. I highly respect what you built.
Thank
and it was awesome being able to hear someone that had a successful exit. We need more stories like that. And I hope over the next decade, we'll see a lot more exits that are
Awesome.
like yours.
Love it. Thanks a lot.
Thanks,
Me too.
brother.
I'd love to see you.